Han, ampete washte na tanyawahi Melissa Buffalo imachiapi na michincha nu muke. Kanji wakpa oyanke na meskwaki oyatepi hemataha. Tiwahewa miniluzaha ekta imakaje. Le wimayana wopila tanka ichichiapi. Hello, good afternoon. My name is Melissa Buffalo. I am a mother of two. I am a member of the Meskwaki Nation and also Crow Creek and Loreboro from here in South Dakota. Again, excited to be here. I am a senior clinical research specialist with the Community Engagement Innovation Division with the Collaborative Research Center for American Indian Health. And I'm going to do a presentation on American Indian history and culture, past and present. But just a little bit about myself before we begin. As I said, my name is Melissa Buffalo. I grew up in Rapid City, graduated there, and then went to the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis for my undergraduate in child psychology and American Indian studies. I then worked on campus for a couple years working with American Indian undergraduate students, and then I decided to go for my graduate degree, came back to South Dakota and attended SDSU and got a master's in human development with emphasis on early childhood education. I then moved to the East Coast for about 8 years, working with Montessori and Reggio Emilia preschool programs. I also spent a year in DC working with the administration for Native Americans and helping, working as a program specialist and working with grantees to achieve their goals and objectives as they wrote some of the grants. Moved back to South Dakota about 3-4 years ago after my mom passed to help my dad. So it's been great. I was working in the juvenile justice system. And then almost a year ago, I joined KRCA, again, under the Community Engagement Innovation Division. So normally if you're in person, I have a pre-test, and this just kind of helps to see what information you know and kind of what information you can walk away with, because I'm all about providing information to everybody. So the questions are, how many federally recognized tribes are located in South Dakota? And can you name any of them? What is historical trauma? Do you know any words in the Lakota language? Can you fill in the blank, kill the blank, save the blank? And what are some examples of social determinants of health? And these answers will be given through the presentation, so just kind of pay attention and you will find the answers, and kind of when I come through the slide, I will let you know as well. And what to expect from this presentation, just a brief overview of American Indian history, kind of as it pertains to more or less the plains, so South Dakota, Minnesota, North Dakota, because I think we could be here all day if we wanted to go over history of American Indians throughout the United States. So again, specific to South Dakota tribes, going over a little bit of historical trauma, kind of looking at ways of healing, how we can help American Indian families and children heal. And then again, social determinants of health as it relates to American Indians and the work we do here at KRCA. So again, normally if you're here in person, I would ask you if you know the words that are about to pop up on the screen. And if you do, go ahead and say them. So I will just say them for you. Merci. Adios. Hola. Ciao. Aloha. Guten Tag. Han. And Hihani Washte. So I usually, again, people will say the words if they know them, and then just kind of have that conversation of, if you, for the most people would probably know merci, hola, adios, aloha. And then Han and Hihani Washte are both Lakota words. For Han is how women say hello, and Hihani Washte is good morning. Guten Tag is hello in German. Ciao is bye in Italian. And so I kind of give that perspective of, how many of us interact with people who speak French or Spanish as their first language, and we interact with those people on a daily basis, and how many of us really use these words, and do we plan to travel to some of these countries, hopefully, but if not, and then we look at, do you know the two words that were presented in Lakota, Han and Hihani Washte? And for the most, I don't get too many people that do know those words, but I kind of give that perspective of you know languages from thousands of miles away, but how many of us know languages from 30 miles up the interstate in Flandreau, or, you know, in the middle of the state on the Crow Creek Reservation? So just kind of being cognizant of, like, do you know the languages that are spoken around you, and that, you know, what is rich in our communities or in our state. And I borrowed this from a friend, Nick Brokenleg, who kind of gave this perspective. So when he presented it to a group I was working with in the juvenile justice system, it just spoke volume to me. So I told him I would share it, and just kind of, it was the light bulb went off for me type of moment. And on the screen you see two maps, one on the left and with words, and one on the right. So I usually ask, what do you think the maps represent? And the map on the left is pre-contact, so you see all, not all, but some of the tribes listed and kind of where they were located. And this is today. So the little red dots, spaces, squares represent tribes today in the United States. So, federally recognized tribes in South Dakota, how many do we think there are? There are 9. The Oglala Sioux tribe, located in the bottom left in southwest South Dakota. Cheyenne River Sioux tribe is north. Rosebud Sioux tribe is next to Pine Ridge, or Oglala Sioux. Then we have the Yankton Sioux tribe, which is southeast. Crow Creek and Lower Brule are located right in the middle. And Flandreau Santee Sioux tribe is the little triangle on the central east. And we have Sisseton Wahpeton, which touches into North Dakota up in the northeast corner, and Standing Rock Sioux tribe kind of in the middle, and they as well touch into North Dakota. If anybody knows, I know if you know where the word Sioux comes from, it's a French term for snake. Just a little bit of more tidbit to the United States in general. There are currently 567 federally recognized tribes in the United States. The last tribe to get federal recognition was the Pamunkey tribe, that are located in Virginia. Before that, in 2010, the Shinnecock Indian Nation, located in Southampton in Long Island, New York, received recognition. Again, I said in 2010. They filed in 1978, so it took 32 years to achieve federal recognition. Historical trauma. So again, if you look at your sheet, kind of what does historical trauma mean to you, or as it applies to American Indians. I just like to show this slide. So historical trauma is entirely different than consciously holding on to the past when it resides in your ancestral memory and DNA. It results in numerous defense mechanisms, developmental malfunctions, and behavioral issues. This is scientific and is supported in studies. Tony Tenfingers, who was Oglala Lakota from Pine Ridge. So then I also kind of give that perspective. If you look at these pictures on the left and kind of think, what do they represent, or what is the time frame that they came from, especially the bottom picture, if you take a look at that and then look at the picture that is coming up on the screen now. Same 3 boys, but then you look, this is probably when they went to boarding school. Their hair was cut. They were no longer allowed to wear their traditional clothing and what they brought when they came to the boarding school. So just very different. So again, brief timeline for American Indian history, again, as it kind of pertains to the Midwest. And this is not entirely everything, but these are just some of the bigger events that I thought I would share with you guys. In 1862, the Dakota 38+2 massacration occurred. So it's also known as the Dakota War of 1862, considered the Sioux Uprising. There were treaty violations by the U.S. For late and unfair payments by Indian agents that caused an increasing hunger and hardship throughout the 50s. So again, in the 60s, they just were like, okay, we can't do this anymore. And can you imagine just not having food and then thinking of the weather that it gets? So, and then again, also perspective is the American Civil War was going on at this time. So in late December of 1962, over 1,000 Dakota Indians were jailed in Minnesota. And then on the 26th of December, 38 Dakota were hung all at once in Mankato, and then 2 were later hung at Fort Snelling in 1865. So a lot of history there. And then I know there's currently an awesome documentary called the Dakota 38+2. It documents a ride that starts in Crow Creek, Lower Brule area, and then they ride across on horses, and some have cars and follow from the middle, so basically the middle of South Dakota all the way to Mankato, and they do it in December, so imagine adding the weather to that as well. But if you go to YouTube, you can YouTube Dakota 38+2, and it's about an hour and 20-minute documentary. So interviews those riding. They stopped at a couple schools. Just a really great information and history perspective. In 1890, the Wounded Knee Massacre occurred, what is now on the Oglala Sioux tribe. The majority of women and men killed in this massacre were men and women. Again, that happened in December as well. It had to do with around when American Indians thought maybe if we had the ghost dance that came from the Southwest, that the prophecy said that Native Americans the land would go back to them and the buffalo would be plenty. And so the government and the agents were not comfortable with that. So around that time, Sitting Bull was killed in Standing Rock, and then some of the natives were trying to make their way to Pine Ridge, and they were camped what is now near Wounded Knee Creek. And the story goes, nobody knows if it was the natives or if it was the agents who fired the first shot, but a shot was fired and basically a massacre occurred. And a snowstorm was coming, so by the time they were able to uncover the bodies, there was they were frozen into the ground. So if you Google some of the images, they're very, very graphic and just kind of bring a lot of emotion. And that was kind of the last major confrontation in the war against natives, was the Wounded Knee Massacre. In 1924, the U.S. granted citizenships to American Indians. In 1956, the Indian Relocation Act occurred. So initially there were 7 cities set up for American Indians to relocate, so they could be provided with quote unquote better jobs. And the Bureau of Indian Affairs was going to provide temporary housing, counseling, and guidance to help them find jobs, housing, connect to the community, and social resources. So it was kind of like a one-way bus ticket. And once they got there, the money probably ran out really quick, and then just that longing for home and knowing that you had a one-way bus ticket, so you kind of didn't have a way to get home, especially if you didn't have a job and you didn't reach out and you didn't know where the resources were. So eventually a lot of these families are built families in these larger cities such as Minneapolis, Denver, Seattle, Oakland. New York has a pretty high population. Where else is there? Chicago. If you look in some of these larger Indian cities, there's pretty established resources and community organizations for American Indians. In 1965, American Indians were allowed to vote. So if you think about that time frame, so in 1939 to 1945, we had World War II was going on. And if you're American Indian, or if your grandparents are veterans, they probably know somebody that was in the Army that's American Indian, because they had the highest rate of American Indians serving in the war as their percent. So they could fight in the war, but they came home and weren't able to vote. 1973 to 1976, we had forced sterilization. And I think about this, and you think about like things that impact you personally, and then we go into trauma. So we think 1973 to 1976, that would put you in your 40s per se. Well, my older sister was born in 74, and then after that we were in and around the Aberdeen area. And so forced sterilization happened in some of the IHS, Indian Health Service hospitals. And from that time, there were 3,400 forced sterilizations within those 3 years, and Aberdeen IHS was one of them. So one, going into the hospital for something as a woman and coming out and not knowing that you basically were sterilized and would never have children again. So I relate that to my mom and thinking if that would have happened to her, and maybe my sister wouldn't have been here, I wouldn't have been here, our family wouldn't have. So you think about things that impact you indirectly, and I think about that especially in looking at that timeline and knowing Aberdeen was one of the IHSs that participated in that. And then the last one I wanted to talk about was the Indian Child Welfare Act that was enacted in 1978 because of the disproportionately high rate of removal of Indian children from their traditional homes, the majority from the reservation, and removed from their families, so basically removed from their culture and placed into non-native homes. So before the enactment, they were seeing that as many as 25 to 35% of all Indian children are being removed from their homes. And again, removing them from their culture. So Indian Child Welfare Act has guidelines and provisions that must be followed, that if you're removing a child from the home for their safety and health reasons, that you look to immediate family, and there's a long list of family that you go to, and then you do your best to keep the child within the tribe. So kind of going back to looking at the impact boarding school has and had on family structure. And if you look at the first bullet, kill the Indian and save the man, kind of was the mantra for the boarding schools. So in 1879, the very first boarding school, Carlisle Indian School, opened in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And that one went until about 1918. Over 100,000 children passed through the boarding school system. So I'm sure a lot of us as American Indians, or if you know somebody, there are probably stories that they have of their grandma or great-grandparents or even parents that went through the boarding school system and have negative memories and maybe good memories of their time there and how much of an impact it played on their culture and their relationship to their family and their community. It was considered the ultimate Americanizer, as it was quoted by Henry Pratt, who initially created Carlisle Indian School. And doing some of my research and learning about all this, I learned that, the Lakota and Dakota in the Midwest were recruited first, I guess, as they were the most quote unquote hostile with the government. So General Pratt apparently went himself and recruited and talked with some of the chiefs and, kind of gave that perspective of why he wanted the children to go to these boarding schools and how much of a benefit it would be to them. So that, again, looking at 100,000 children passing through the boarding school system and how many generations down it's still impacting families today. So these next two slides kind of go together if we look at barriers that children face as well as families. So I'll kind of go back and forth because if you look at some of them, a lot of the things that the barriers and the experiences they have kind of go hand in hand. So both of them kind of loss of culture, loss of connection to who they are as Native people, disconnection from family again is impacts both of them. A need to survive. I look at some of these, you see some of the families today and it's just a day-to-day thing of how are we going to survive and not really being able to plan for the future. And I look at that too and I think of some of the things, we go through and myself growing up in alcoholic families. So, you look at how are we going to pay these bills or what's for dinner. It wasn't more of let's plan for vacation next summer, but it was more of how are we going to get through the next day and the next week. So just basic need to survive. Lack of adequate health care. If you look at a lot of families that had to that maybe still rely on using Indian Health Services and kind of the funding that goes into that. But, one, do they have health insurance and really taking that into perspective? Again, same thing here, loss of the old ways, no direction, no support, probably direct, indirect boarding school, disconnection from family, and trauma, and we'll kind of go into trauma and what that impact has on individuals and families and communities here in the next few slides. So this is, you see this trauma web that's up. It comes from Native Wellness. They are out of Oregon. So when I was in the juvenile justice system, we did this Native Wellness trauma web. And if you look kind of, I guess if you can see, on the left are various types of trauma that can affect our lives. And then on the right is characteristics of trauma. And then in the middle is supposed to be you. So you give everybody one of these worksheets and you have them draw a line to each one that either impacted you directly or your parents or grandparents. So filling it out, and I look at my experience, and I filled it out with a cousin of mine who attended this workshop, and we probably had almost 75% lines to connecting to the types and the characteristics, and it's kind of like, oh my God. And then I started using this with some of the youth I worked with in the juvenile justice system, and you think about how resilient youth are and how much of an positive impact they can have on you when you think you just want to help them and give them the best. But working with the youth, this was her trauma web. And so just to see the butterfly, and then you think about how growing and expanding and being able to see the positive in all the things that she initially drew lines to. So I walked away very happy and knowing that what she sees maybe as negatives can be turned into positives. And with that, we kind of go into healing and looking at reattachment to Native values, development of healthy spirituality, and that can affect, or that can impact the individual, the family, and, the community as a whole, and how we heal. And then kind of looking at what opportunities are available in the urban area or on the reservation, looking at, positive Indian parenting classes. So So we look at how do we heal, and how can we learn these ways, and how do we give children and parents a sense of belonging. We can look at a naming ceremony that helps the child to identify to their tribe, and that can even go to adults too that might not have had that connection as children. Other ceremonies we have, wiping of the tears, can be done a year or during the year that a loved one passes away to help ease the grief and to let go of a loved one. So that's kind of common in some of the Lakota cultures in ways. Again, we look at individual and family and community healing. Sharing trauma helps to provide relief, and mourning and healing can help with identity and commitment. So we look at some of those. And again, just helping individuals connect to their roots, and what can you do to how do we show our pride as individuals or as people, in our family, and maybe in our background, if we're French or Italian, or the community we belong to, do we go to church, and just, kind of those connections we think about on a daily basis. And that kind of, we look at healing and trauma and what that means, and how do we connect that to our health. And we look at social determinants of health, so that can impact the economic stability, our neighborhood and the built environment, health and healthcare, education, and social and community context. So when I work with, if you were in person, just kind of giving examples of, what determines your health, what can help us to be healthier, what helps us to not be healthy, and that, again, the answers I've received have been great and some that I'm like, yeah, I didn't think about that one. So as Kirka and the things we do, we kind of help to fill in those gaps, and how we can help communities and tribes do the research to help impact social determinants in health and better address some of the issues that may or may not be going on in some of the communities. So social determinants of health are the conditions in which people are born, grow, live, work, and age. These circumstances are shaped by the distribution of money, power, and resources at global, national, and local levels. And we think about the impact. Some of it could be immediate, and it could be long-term. So some of the pictures I have up are, I live in Sioux Falls, so I look at the commute and the traffic I go through every day just to get my kids to school and then get to work, how that can impact every day in my health. And then some of you might have noticed the other pictures. Pasteurized processed cheddar cheese is also considered the golden block for American Indians, and how much we love this cheese and how probably horrible it is for our bodies. Then the picture on the bottom left is what's known as commodity foods, so government foods. I can remember growing up and going to my grandma's basement and thinking, oh my God, I'm in heaven because there's all these commodities, and there's juice, and there's cereal, and there's peanut butter that when you open, the grease is all on the top, and there's peanuts. And you think, what is the long-term impact that all these dried foods and these canned foods that were issued by the government has on my body, or, you know, just the health or the growing that I did? So, and if that was your only option, you kind of didn't have a choice. And then we look at the capital and kind of the choices again, that we look at the choices that are made at that higher level up, and how it doesn't impact us directly, but you know, those trickle down effects can affect us. So again, talked about, some of you are familiar with the work we do here at the Collaborative Research Center for American Indian Health. Our mission is to bring together tribal communities and health researchers within South Dakota, North Dakota, and Minnesota. And we, our goal is to build tribal research infrastructure and transdisciplinary research teams to improve American Indian health through examination of social and environmental influences on health. So we currently work with 6 tribes across the 3 states, and some of, you know, they all vary in the work that they're doing, and they're all doing amazing things to bring awareness and help build research infrastructure in their communities. So again, we want to help tribal communities and health professionals plan and perform research addressing the health issues of American Indians in South Dakota, North Dakota, and Minnesota. And we have corps and divisions that all work with the tribes and give them support. So we have an administrative team, we have a community engagement and innovation division, research, cultural science and bioethics corps, regulatory knowledge corps, and methodology corps. So we just really work to bridge research with the community and help how do we support communities and help them understand that research is important and valued, and that the work that can be brought to the community can help better address health priorities. So I was giving this presentation about a month ago, and when we left, one of the girls who was a refugee from Central Africa came up to me and had thanked me for the presentation, and she had said, you know, it's good to see that there's other poor people outside of my people. And it just kind of made me think, oh my God, like, am I not giving a presentation that shows hope and that shows that resiliency? So I kind of I have this slide up and I showed it. And so I just really want to emphasize like the things that are happening today and the great things that American Indians have done and the research. And we look back at the support that we've given them. So, on the top left is Shoni Schimmel. She currently plays for the WNBA. She is a Umatilla from, I want to say Oregon or Washington, but her and her sister, excuse me, were both played for, oh my God, I can't think of the university they both played for, but they both played for Louisville, and then Shoni went on to play for the WNBA, and they both give back to the American Indian communities. So it's good to see positive role models out there. On the very right side, we have Lakota popcorn, which is produced and made from the Laurel Brew Reservation. And if you live around here or are familiar with this area, you know, you can go into your grocery store and sometimes see it. So it's always a nice thing to go in. In the bottom middle, the Tonka Bar was founded in 2006 in Pine Ridge. The owners are Carlisle Hunter and Mark Tilson, and they just kind of wanted a community that was filled with healthy foods that, you know, that help add to the restoration and preservation of our lands and ecosystems. So their kind of focus was looking at a world without the pain of starvation and obesity. So they wanted also to incorporate our culture and kind of the foods that are traditional. We have the Tonka Bar, which combines buffalo meat and berries. So if you see it out there, go ahead and try it. And then the other 2 pictures have to do currently with the Dakota Access Pipeline and looking at the protectors. And coming from my perspective, I've seen so many youth see the importance of water and how much of an impact it has on our bodies and our land. So whether or not you support it or not, it's just, you know, for me, it's a good thing to see the youth and the communities come together to support what they feel is important to them. And the last thing I have, if you want to YouTube The Lakota Berenstein Bear Project was produced with the goal of bringing the Lakota language to family television sets across Lakota-speaking communities in North and South Dakota, and again, well beyond. But 20-episode Lakota language edition of the Berenstein Bears. It's a first of its kind, the first ever Native American language cartoon series ever. It's amazing. YouTube it, 20 videos in Lakota. I grew up with the Berenstein Bears, and I can remember wanting to order them on the book orders, so looking now at the Lakota Language Consortium and them working with some of the elders and youth in Standing Rock and creating these episodes in Lakota is just awesome. So that's kind of how I wanted to end on something positive, that can affect youth, but it also affect adults as well and families. This is just something awesome to watch, and I watch it with my children. So I thank you for your time. And again, if you look at the pre and post test that we had earlier, I hope that you were able to walk away with new knowledge. If you have any questions, you can contact me at melissa.buffalo, melissa.buffalo @sanfordhealth.org. So thank you for your time. I hope you have a great day.